back to the Empowerment News Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Maurine Kwende. I'm the CEO and founder of EMK Learning Solutions. If you're tuning in for the first time, this podcast is for leaders and professionals across learning and development, coaching, talent development, human resources, and basically anyone working to grow, lead well, and build stronger teams and cultures. So this month we're continuing with our series, Culture by Design, what leaders reward, permit, and model. So we began by looking at the leadership patterns that communicate culture. And last week we focused on what leaders reward and how recognition can quietly reinforce the behaviors people begin to repeat. So today we're looking at another powerful influence on culture, what leaders permit. So my question for you is, what are you allowing as a leader to continue on your team that may be quietly becoming part of your culture? Leaders do not just shape the culture through what they encourage. They also shape it through what they leave unaddressed. And what happens is when they don't address things, leaders permitting those things is now sending a message. Now, when we talk about what leaders permit, we're not just talking about behaviors that they openly approve. In many cases, even in my experience, in my leadership journey, there were leaders who would disagree with the behavior, but avoiding addressing it because the time feels inconvenient, the conversation feels uncomfortable, they don't want to deal with it, or the immediate problem seems easier to work around. Does that sound like you? Is that something that in any way, shape, and form you do allow? This challenge is something that leaders really need to pay attention to, because what leaders respond to and what they do not also send a message. So when a team member repeatedly misses commitments, or someone else quietly picks up the work, and then maybe a high-performing employee delivers strong results, but at the same time treats their coworkers poorly, and they get away with it. Meetings starting late, run over, or allowing the same voice to dominate conversations. When these things happen, they're sending a message. Eventually, people stop seeing these situations as exceptions. They begin to understand them as part of how the team operates. And so you can see that what the leader is permitting becomes the culture. When things go unaddressed, they become harder to change. Sometimes leaders would hope that this problem would correct itself, which doesn't happen, especially when the team is busy or the issue doesn't seem as urgent. So when behaviors continue without a response, they become even more difficult to address later. And this is because people begin to organize themselves around them, finding that workaround. So a missed deadline becomes something others compensate for. Poor communication becomes something people learn to tolerate. And what does that speak about your culture? Right. This lack of ownership becomes something that strongest team members absorb, which shouldn't be the case. I'm going to give you and share with you an example or a scenario that maybe you can relate to. Consider this leader who has a high capable manager on the team. So when something begins to fall apart, that manager, because a high capable, in quotes, steps in. And this could mean someone missing a deadline or and then the manager steps in to finish their work, right? And she takes over. If a project starts slipping, here comes a knight in shining armor. She reorganizes the plan and gets everyone moving again. And so her leader appreciates her because she's dependable. And the team also appreciates her because she makes problems disappear. And this works, right? It seems to work. But think about what happens over time. Other team members begin escalating issues to this manager even more quickly, right? And so this becomes a pattern. How workload grows, right? And so the team's overall capacity does not grow with it. Eventually, what happens? She pays a price. She becomes overwhelmed. The leader begins wondering why so much depends on one person. And when she becomes overwhelmed, what does that do to her capacity? Right? And so the team also has learned that pattern that when something becomes difficult, she's going to carry it. And so this pattern was never formally designed, but it was allowed to continue. This is what we describe as overfunctioning, because it's not that when you're overfunctioning, you're not capable. You're capable, right? But this now becomes the culture. And this is one of the ways overfunctioning moves from being an individual, issue, habit, to becoming a culture issue. It's systemic. So a high capable leader may take on more because they care about the outcome. They want to protect the team, right? And in the short run, it can feel efficient. But what is that costing the organization if this is not resolved? So leaders need to ask questions like, are expectations clear enough? Are people being held accountable for their responsibilities? Are team members given the opportunity to solve problems before someone steps in? Those questions move the conversation from the individual to the culture. So now, let me ask you, what are you working around you? What have you learned to work around instead of addressing? Leaders often become very good at compensating for something like this, which I would call a dysfunction. They're rearranging work, stepping in, smoothing things over, sweeping things under the carpet. Culture by design requires leaders to notice when these workarounds have become normal and challenge it and decide whether this pattern still serves your team. So this is an opportunity for you to start addressing those issues. What have you permitted? And how is that showing up for you? How is that affecting your culture? And what can you do to shift things around? So that's what I would like you to do. First maybe start with an audit. Identify the behavior your team has been repeatedly doing, right? And then ask yourself clearly, have I simply learned to work around it? And what can I do differently? So choose one pattern and identify that conversation or that expectation or that leadership action that you have been delaying that needs to shift. So you don't keep solving things all the time by yourself and at once. Okay? So start with one behavior you no longer want to normalize. And so if this topic resonates with you, this is really what we're going to be talking about on August 20 on overfunctioning. This is the title of the webinar is The Overfunctioning Trap: How Capable Leaders Quietly Lose Their Influence. So I'd like you to join us. The link is in the comment section in the show notes. And so you can learn some additional strategies that you can take back the time or steps that you can take to correct these issues within your organization. So as we close, remember that culture is influenced not just by what you reward, but also by what you allow to continue. That includes behavior that you work around, things that you compensate for, things that you're avoiding to address those conversations. So I challenge you to take action this week. Take a closer look at that pattern you may have been tolerating and ask yourself, when are you going to be able to make that shift and make that commitment? So next week, we're going to close the series with what leaders model, right? I'll take that over again. What leaders model gets repeated. We're going to get into that even more as we close off this series, right? So if this episode gave you something to reflect on, I'd like you to share with another leader who's working to build a stronger and healthier workplace culture. I joined the newsletter for additional leadership practices, tools, and strategies. And once again, the link is in the show notes. This is Dr. Maurine Kwende signing off. Until next time, Pay attention to what you're allowing to continue, because the culture you build is shaped by what you address as much as by what you encourage. I'll see you same time next week.